Hello, friends, and welcome to the Cinemato podcast.
I wish we had kind of our 70s fashion on right now. I know we all have some somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, my undershirt's from 1978. It's a Fruit of the Loom. So
no, that's the one thing I was very, very drawn to this movie because it's called Dusk for Hitman. It's set in the 70s. That's all I need to hear.
The late 70s, early 80s.
Late 70s, early 80s, which when I hear 70s, I instantly want to watch it because the fashion's cool. The movies from the 70s are great. So I was hoping that this movie would have a 70s movie vibe, and it does. And I think a lot of it was the cinematography was so on point, so good, that I felt like I was watching a 70s movie. So I really like that.
Yeah, and it's a Canadian crime drama, French-Canadian.
Yeah.
So the director was Raymond St-Jean, and the film stars Éric Bruneau and Sylvain Marcel and Benoît Gouin. So it's a French-Canadian film set in the 70s, probably filmed in Montreal or, some suburbs. And it very much looks like it. In the French title is Crépuscule pour un tour, which I guess
nice.
So, but the look is fantastic. It's just, everything sort of looks like, hey, this looks like this film by Joseph Sargent in 1975 or something.
It does. And they don't overplay the 70s because you can get cartoony. And a lot of especially the wardrobe and the hairstyling and all that. You can push it too hard and then it looks too fake and kind of goofy. But they made it feel kind of natural. Like he had a 70s look, but most of you could only tell because the hair was kind of longer with some longer sideburns, but they didn't overdo pompadour or some kind of weird. They kept it in check, and the big lapels.
He had the kind of scruffy beard, which wasn't really a thing at that point. But like you said, there is a fine line between something like this movie and the Sabotage video by the Beastie Boys.
Right.
So I thought that was really good. And I thought the lead actor was really great and compelling. And I was on board and following him. And I was sympathetic to him the whole way through, even though he did rather questionable things very often. You still root for the guy because he is a hitman. He's based on being a cold-blooded killer. But
based on a true story as well.
Yes, and based on a true story. So it's a real guy. So they made him look very cool.
Yeah, but I kind of I wonder, one of the things about movies like this is that you have to keep all your ducks in a row, is with your storytelling. You have to make sure that things line up the way they should if you're going to have a character that is a certain type of character. Some people were saying that this is sort of like the Canadian Goodfellas or the French Canadian Goodfellas, because it's kind of that sort of gangster life story about somebody that you don't really like. I mean, you don't really like Henry Hill in Goodfellas milieu, and you don't like this guy at all. You're watching him because you kind of know that the end is coming or some horrible thing is coming. Everybody that steps into his life, you worry about him because he's a hothead. I mean, he just pops people off at, and to me, I felt like he was I didn't get enough of what made him so good. He was supposed to be like so good, and the boss man Claude treats him like he's like the master, but I didn't quite get a full sense of why he was considered such a excellent gangster.
It's interesting you say that because I wonder, when you think hitman, you think it's going to be someone who's really cold-blooded and super organized and very on point and specific and very I think this is probably more realistic that you have a guy
maybe so
and not feel bad, a little bit of a loose cannon, not necessarily organized, just psychopathic enough that he can just take orders and kill someone he doesn't know for no reason. Like he's good at doing that. The only thing I felt was weird is when he takes on that apprentice who was like, I need the money. He's like, okay, you're in. I thought, why would this guy do that? Like, it felt a little bit, I mean, I kind of know why he did it, but when he takes him to do a hit, they're taking him on an assignment and it all goes wrong, which I did love that scene because that's the thing you don't expect. Like they walk into this house, it all seemed a little like they just kind of bust in. It didn't seem sneaky. It didn't seem specific, but at the same time, maybe that's really how it is. They're just criminals. I mean,
Everything went wrong.
Well, Hitman are,
what I'll say is, like, when I think of a Hitman film or an assassin film, I think of first like The Day of the Jackal, which is like the most high level professional, kind of thing, or they know what they're doing every step of the way, like that the recent Fincher movie, sort of the same sort of thing, in a way. But this is exactly not that. No. He doesn't know what he's doing, sort of. He's just like,
he's just following orders. Oh, you want me to kill somebody?
It's a weird thing for me to say, okay, this is not really a hitman I expect to see in a film.
Right. Which it seems like from the beginning, you're probably maybe right, but from the beginning of the film, it seems like every gig he gets, he messes it up somehow, and it's with these. And it's the kind of thing where you in the movie language, in the language of crime dramas, films that we've all seen a million times, you see it coming a mile away, and you're thinking, "Oh no, don't get that guy,
that guy of all people."
And he's sitting there with his brother, and his brother is this obvious, that character type, and his brother's saying, "Yeah, I need some money. I want to get in on your deal here," and he's like, "Okay."
All right, sure.
It's like,
you need the money.
Haven't you ever watched a movie?
Exactly. Yes. This is a world.
I liked it. I liked the kind of loose cannon. But I also think what's interesting too, because we're so used to this now, is that it was pure analog. There were no cell phones. There was no following up on people. They couldn't track people. It was like there's no computers. It's like they had to do everything by like getting on the ground, using wiretapping was about as high tech as it got. But it's like this guy, to do an assignment, had to surveil the people, find out where they were, and just kind of, well, I guess I'm going in now and doing it. Yeah. And they didn't really, was there other people in the house? Like what? So it felt like, because we didn't have that kind of specific and electronic trail or any of the things that help, like calling and coordinating, if you're a few minutes late, who do you call? How do you tell? Like what? Right. So I like that little element of it, doing a job like this, which would be much easier to do in the present day because you have all this tech, that he was just like winging it. It was just like small town hood, he's going in and doing his job, and he somehow manages to get it done enough that the one guy trusts him. I don't know why, but I think that's what I liked about it. It was a little scruffy,
Yeah. One surprising moment that goes along with what you're saying is during that there's a bank heist thing where he's got to hang out in a certain place and wait for them to call. And they're basically said, we're going to do this, you do that, and we'll call you when the coast is clear. And you see him, and in my mind, I'm expecting, okay, his cell phone is going to ring.
Yeah, exactly.
Or he's going to look at it, and it's going to be his guy, and he's going to not even answer it and know that everything's cool. But the phone of the people's house that he's in rings, and you're thinking, maybe they're making the call from the bank at a payphone, so it doesn't matter that they can trace the call. And I'm thinking, this is an analog world. They can't do that. Maybe
can't do it.
Right.
So you can just call the person's house who you just took hostage.
And DNA was even like barely. No, I mean, I don't think that was even on the horizon yet. So all of these crimes were a lot easier to get done. So all these things that we consider sloppy, they didn't really have to worry about it. It's like, they didn't really have to worry about finding DNA. They didn't worry about tracking the phone calls. They didn't have to, that's what's kind of interesting about it, is it felt a little like, wow, they're just kind of running off and doing shit. But that's how you did it.
It's interesting to watch a movie set in the late 70s, early 80s. And I lived through that. So you kind of have to go back to that. Okay, what was it like when I was like that age?
What was it like?
Or watching movies that were made in the late 70s.
Yes, 70s movies are so good.
How does it compare to that?
Yeah.
Not only, is there anything anachronistic in the film? Do I see a Hyundai driving by? Do I see? I'm always looking out for that stuff. And this did a good job, and I felt like they sort of hit the nail pretty much on the head as far as that was concerned.
Yeah.
The cars were nice in this. They weren't like super fancy. And also, a lot of times the people, this is like a little technical aside here. A lot of times when you see period cars in films, they get them from people who collect and restore period cars, who rent them out to filmmakers and people that have a whole, like a parking lot full of 70s cars or 60s cars.
Exactly.
And they, out here in Hollywood, places where they have an infrastructure for filmmaking. But this film seems like those 70s cars were a little bit beat up, which is the way they were.
I love that.
They had the hubcaps, they weren't all decked out 100%. The guy is driving a 1975 Cutlass S, which is not a super cool car at the time.
It looks cool now, though.
And it was that ugly kind of, rust color, that
kind of thing. Yeah.
And it was like the cars were not. I mean, I know that's a weird thing to notice or to care about it all that much, but there was a scene in the hotel parking lot where I counted them. There were 8 vintage cars in that parking lot, and I was thinking, that's a day where they rented 8 cars for this shot out in the parking lot, and they drive past these cars, and I was looking at the cars, and they had little dings in them, and they looked appropriately, of the period. But also like people's cars.
Yeah.
And not like all these pristine restored cars.
Yeah, they're not collected. They're actually driven and just being used as a car.
They put an ad in the local paper, like, hey, we need your 1970, 1980 car, preferably.
But they didn't look like they were old, like total beaters from the 70s,
Right.
They looked like current cars, like somebody was looking at old photographs from the 70s and thinking, all right, we need to put hubcaps over these rims, or whatever.
Yeah,
exactly. I also really I think we should talk a little bit about the actress who played Francine, as Rosemarie Perreault.
Yeah,
I thought she was, that's the kind of thing where she's kind of at home, where he would go kind of like his little hideout in a way, like he goes there, not a hitman here, but he kind of was. I love where he's been gone and he comes walking the door with like a big shelf or something, like for the kids' room, like.
Oh, it was like a dollhouse.
Yeah, dollhouse. So he comes in, look, I brought a dollhouse. And she turns around, she's like, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. But I liked her kind of put upon mistrust of him. And they have this great scene where they have the party. They have people over and he's all getting into his wife and she's kind of getting to him. But she has this sort of really restrained, I thought, kind of a little bit of fear. You could feel there was a little bit of resistance in her, even with him and his most charming.
Yeah.
You could tell, like, she brought in a very kind of, it's so hard to explain, but there's this level of like a little bit of fear, yearning, and like wanting it to work, but knowing it's a disaster and she can't put up with it much longer. Like she didn't have a ton of scenes or a ton of dialogue. So I thought that she did a great job of going, I can't do this anymore without saying that, she's all like,
she knows what he does.
Yeah, she knows. She's kind of, she's like, a lot of these wives with, that you see in movies when their husbands are doing shady shit, like even like Goodfellas, where you just kind of try to ignore it. Yeah. And like, maybe it'll just go away eventually. He's going to do this one time. I'm sure he says it too. I'll just do this one more time. We need the money. I'll just do one more time. I really thought she was really good in this. She felt very realistic to me. And it felt like someone who would be putting up with that, kind of an abusive relationship like that. It was really well done. Very, very elegant and spare, but it was there. And I appreciate that little bit in that movie.
Because there's that scene on the dock where they're talking and she says something about, I grew up in a criminal family of crooks, so she's been around it. Yeah. And then you get the impression that's how he met her. They run in those circles. Yeah. And she, at one point, says, what do you want me to rob a bank? And she's like, well, give me your gun and I'll do it. And he looks at her and you get the feeling like, don't give her the gun because she might,
Yeah. It's like, huh. And also it kind of explains why she would put up with, like, it's kind of like people who have been abused as kids and a bad home life end up repeating the cycle.
Yes.
Which she's kind of doing by getting involved because that's her comfort zone. Like, she's like, yeah, he's a criminal. So what? I can handle it, And so, and he was very good looking, very charming, very, very cool in his 70s vibe. You could see his charm working on everyone. And then when he would do these terrible things, it didn't always work. But when he finally gets caught and he has to decide, this is all based on true story, like where he has to decide to turn basically informant, kind of undercover against this mob boss. I think he did a pretty good job of thinking, how much trouble am I in? Like he couldn't quite, he gets caught for his dumb, stupid, messed up crime he did. So then there he's sitting there thinking, like, it seemed like he's almost like, I'll be fine. But then it was kind of like, maybe I'm not going to be fine. Like, I liked his sort of realization that he's not getting out of this. Because normally he probably thinks he can. And then he's like, shit, now I'm stuck. And so I thought that was pretty well done too. That little turn in his attitude and going, I'm going to have to do this.
And I like how it's kind of like the sketchy street level crime too. It's not
it's not
the
big
boss,
brand.
Claude the boss, Claude Dubois. The boss man is not all that big of a deal, really.
Not at all. I love that too.
He controls the bar on the corner, and it's like
I love
the best bar in town.
Yeah. And this great scene where he's like, your brother is selling mushrooms out in front of my bar, and I want you to put a stop to it.
Yeah.
Like
it was false. And that's why, that's sort of, to me, kind of the Sopranos effect too. Of like, here's this big mob boss. Oh yeah, he runs like a waste management. Like he's basically a garbage man.
Well, that's the fun. Yeah, but this
and runs
guy's
a strip club. It's all really
this
low
guy's big gig seems to be a couple of bars and like getting protection money from bartenders and people in the and that kind of low something that would trouble him, that a guy's making $5 a pop selling bags of mushrooms out in front of his bar, and
I would think that would be a draw to get people to the bar, so give the guy some credit.
But that low brow sort of crime or that street level really kind of enhances the movie, the whole sort of feel of the movie. And sometimes I feel about this in certain Canadian films I see, especially, they have a certain feel to them. And I don't know what, because I see mostly Cronenberg films.
The gray skies.
There's something sort of like dark and weird about it.
Always seems cold somehow. Or never have leaves on them.
There's a certain feel to that. And this movie had that, I think, to its positive side. So it's a film that's coming out streaming on April 19th. So if you're in the mood for sort of like a French Canadian crime drama that's set in the late 70s, early 80s with some cool cars that don't look too pristine.
Bring back the 70s, man. I want to see the lapels and the bell bottom, not too much bell bottom, not like hippie level, but the suits have like some curves. It's great.
Right. Flair.
Flair, yes.
I just want to sit in a car that has a bench front seat. When I get out, I can get out
in the middle.
Side.
You can just slide across.
Slide off like they used to always do in TV shows. Like, why is that guy not getting out of the driver's seat? Why is he swinging over to the passenger side?
I love this big gold chains, and it's like everything about it was just
a lot of necklaces and
exactly.
I think I was mostly hypnotized by the whole look of it. Like I said, cinematography was just gorgeous. It's like the wardrobe was on point, so it almost didn't even matter what they were doing, though. I appreciate that it was a thriller. I just loved seeing them act this out and be in that environment and be in that era. It was just such a fun ride just to be in that. And even though it probably takes a little bit, it took me a long time for it to get to where the whole point of the movie, which was him turning informant. Like I feel like they took a long time getting to that. And even though I still feel like the first part was really entertaining, they could have sped it up a little, because I would like to have seen a little more cat and mouse, like at the end, a little more of him like trying to outsmart the boss and like how he's going to do it and how the informing actually worked. A little bit more of that, and to actually see maybe part of the trial or something. But overall, super fun. Really fun
it pulled me in. It's a story that pulled me in, which is the test. If I start watching a movie and I'm 15, 20 minutes into it and I'm like, oh, when is this going to end?
That's trouble.
That's bad. But this one is not. This one I mean, he's a character, like we said, he's a character that you start off not liking. He's flawed, and he's also I felt like there could have been a couple of scenes where we saw how good he was, because remember there's another movie with Michael Keaton that we reviewed recently. Folks can find it in our archives.
Knox Goes
about
Away.
it. Knox Goes Away, about a hitman who is supposedly the best at what he does. And we actually see in the film why he is so good. You're like, whoa, this guy knows what he's doing. He's really good at it. I wish there had been a scene in this film up front that showed why Donald was so revered, But then again, like Kathy said, maybe that's the point of it, that this is just street level gutter type.
Yes. He was just a guy who would do the job. Like he just went, okay, fine, I'll go shoot this guy.
Exactly.
I don't care.
Okay. That's why he's considered so good. He's the guy.
He'll do it.
He'll
get the job done.
Right.
So maybe that's the point of it.
Which makes it interesting as far as a hitman film, because that's unusual. Usually the hitman, you do see that stuff. So so that's what makes it kind of an unusual film. There's a lot of reasons to check it out. So
hot dude in the 70s is a hitman. Copy line done. Watch this movie. That's all you need to know.
So, Dusk.
The other thing I love about it is, like, something else that Kathy mentioned is the whole analog idea of it. The idea of setting a film in those times gives you so many story opportunities for, not having a freaking cell phone and not having a computer and not having access to somebody's, online history and blah, blah, blah. All those things that we're so accustomed to now that frankly are kind of boring. It's like they looked up his history and they found out that he looked up explosives. And so now they know, it's all online. It's like they're looking at computers to do their detective work. Right. But in this, they're in cars, they're running through the snow, they're chasing the guy. And that's something that's so fun to see. And that's, I think, part of the reason why they set this film in the 70s.
Yeah, I thought, and that's when it really happened in real life.
Yeah.
And that's when it really happened. That could be a part of it too. Yeah.
Part of it too. But so definitely take a chance at this movie. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a fun ride. It's unique. I haven't seen a lot of movies like this, so I say watch it.
Structured nicely. One last thing. There's one little scene that I have to mention this because I thought it was really well done in the film, really brilliantly played. Story structure and scripting is so important in telling a story that pulls you in, and you don't want to have a film that people say, oh, it was so long and boring. You don't want that. So you need to keep the wheels rolling in your story. And something needs to happen during the story. Like you can't have long stretches of boring. So there's one scene in it, and I don't want to give anything away, but there's a scene in it where a heist is kind of explained. Someone says, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And you're seeing cuts, like quick cuts of it happening. Yeah. And then after the person is explaining what we're going to do, you're dropped into the thing near the end of it. So a whole lot of storytelling, a whole lot of narrative was reduced down. The stuff that you don't need to see all that much. And
that's true.
Get to the meat of that part of the story really quickly and effectively. I thought that was a really efficient way of telling that little side story without dragging us into the whole process. Like, okay, we've seen this a million times. Get to the point.
Yeah.
And that was nicely done, I thought.
It was. They did a lot of great stuff in this movie. So check it out.
Editing is nice, and I think just the writing.
Yep.
Check it out. April 19th, Dusk for Hitman. Thanks everybody for watching, and go see the movie.